All right. Hello and welcome to our interview of George Groppi. My name is Finley Groppi and presenting with me is Jalen from Banks. The date is currently December 6th, 2020. All right. Question one.
Okay.
What was your childhood like?
What was it like? It was a happy childhood. I came from a big family. Not my individual family, but the Groppi family was big. My grandfather, who owned the store, he had 10 kids, and they all lived probably within a mile of the store, mile radius of the store. So I grew up with about 50 cousins around all the time, and it was a good childhood. I grew up in South Side of Milwaukee, Bayview area. Went to grade school at IC, Immaculate Conception. Um, it was a pretty normal childhood for that time. This was the baby boomer era, so there were a lot of kids around. It was a little different than you guys are growing up with. Our families were generally four or more kids in each family, so there were kids everywhere. So it was a good childhood. Went to IC grade school, as I said, all 8 years there, and family life was good. So I had a brother that was about 1 year younger than I was, so we were kind of inseparable. We kind of grew up together and did most things together. So, well, I don't know what you want to know about my childhood, what a typical day was like.
Yeah, I was
Well,
about to ask, like, what kind of some of the activities that you guys used to take part in during your childhood?
Okay, we generally most of our activities were pretty unsupervised. Parents were not terribly involved. They were supportive, but they weren't terribly involved. Most of the activities were not structured activities. A typical day, summertime day, for instance, we would go to the playground, which would be a park that had some asphalt on it, and there would be swings and monkey bars and those sort of things, but a lot of baseball diamonds, basketball hoops. There was a building normally there with a supervisor, who was normally a college kid that got hired just to kind of watch younger kids at the playground, make sure they didn't get any trouble. There were games available there. We had did a lot of baseball. Most of my youth was pretty much around sports. We did play a lot of ball, baseball, basketball, and football.
okay. One of the questions I wanted to ask you regarding your youth was, I mean, I don't know how much you know about like what the youth is like today, but what are like some of the biggest changes you've kind of seen between like what you did as when you were a kid and what kids like tend to do now?
Well, obviously there was none of the video and technical equipment. What we did was play with each other. We were around other kids on a regular basis. There were a lot of kids around. I think in your life nowadays, there aren't as many kids around. You don't have as many outside activities with them. If you do, that they're structured. Our kids, when we were kids, we got together at playgrounds. We played games. We chose sides. We picked, we played baseball, basketball, but very seldom did we have a referee, a coach, any of that kind of stuff. It's pretty much individual activities that the kids took care of themselves. Parents also weren't around as often. They kind of let us on our own, and we took care of ourselves. There probably wasn't as much crime and dangerous stuff to get into. All kids cause trouble, but it was a different level of trouble, I think, when we were kids. So I think that was probably the biggest difference is the amount of kids, the amount of interaction with other kids that we had as kids versus what you have as kids.
Okay. And then one of the things I wanted to bring up too about your youth was you mentioned in the pre-interview that you spent a lot of time at the Groppi Store when you were younger.
Mm-hmm.
Just as a kid, like when did you really start working there like a lot?
We probably started working there when we were maybe 12 years old, 14 years old. Primarily, we'd start as stock boys. We'd help move stock around, stock shelves, marked product. As we got a little older, we moved behind the counter and worked with the money and worked with customers. When I was probably during high school ages, when we spent a lot of time working there. But my dad always made sure we had our outside activities were first. If we had baseball games, if we had practices, any of that kind of stuff, that was first, and then we'd work around there. But if we needed money, or if he wanted us to get used to working for a living and having some responsibility, that's where we spent it. Also, the playground that we would gathered at was very close to the store, so we would be in and out of the store for lunches and rides home, and if any problems came up during the day, so we were around there. But the actual working time probably started around 12, and probably behind the counter in our teen years.
Okay. And then what kinds of people did you encounter at the store? Like, what kind of people would just come in there on a normal basis?
The store was a neighborhood store, and it was kind of a landmark in the Bayview area. Everybody knew where Groppi Store was. People shopped there multiple times a day. They'd come to the store to meet people and talk to people and find out what's going on in a neighborhood. So it was neighborhood people. It was mostly adults. Mostly it was an Italian neighborhood, so most of the people were Italian. The store specialized in sausages and Italian food. So we met just neighborhood people. We got to know all the neighborhood people and their kids. The interesting thing, you asked about what's different about my era and your era. There was a lot of trust and a lot of honesty in our era. It was not unusual for a kid, under the age of 10 to 12, or even younger, to show up at the store with a grocery list and a bag full of money, and hand it to one of us and said, "Here, this is what my mom wants today." And we would fill the order, put it in the wagon that they would bring with them, and they would take it back home and put the change in the bag. And it was totally trustworthy. There was never any thought that we would cheat them or that they would be cheated. And if there wasn't any issue, we knew where they lived. We knew where all the people lived. We showed up, went back to their homes with them sometimes if it was the bags were too heavy or anything like that, or if they were short of money or anything, we would go back with them to their homes. So it was a real neighborhood family organization, and everyone knew everybody. So.
Okay. And then I watched Colin's interview with Tommy, and he told a story about when he was working there that he got involved in a stick up. Do you have any interesting experiences at the store like that?
Not like that. The most interesting would probably be once in a while, guys would show up in there. They were short change artists, quick change artists. And they would do some things like they'd come in with a $10 bill and give it to you and say, "Hey, give me a 5 and 5 singles." And then when you're halfway through cashing out the 5 and 5 singles, you take a single and say, "Well, give me 8 quarters." And then they'd get real quick with the money. And what they were trying to do was get you to give them more money than they gave you in the first place. And I remember once, and you talk about Tommy, a guy was in there and he was doing that to me, and he maybe came in with a $20 bill and said, "Give me a 10 and 2 5s." And then halfway through, he took a 5 and said, "Hey, give me 6 singles." And Tommy just put his hand on the guy on the money, and he said, "Get out of here." And the guy just looked at him and he said, "Just take your money and get out of here." And he just told me, he said, "Anytime you see anything like that, just slow down. The guy tries to speed you up, just slow down and make sure that you're doing everything right." So that was probably the most exciting thing. There wasn't a lot of excitement when I was there. There was no stick-ups when I was there. That was done after hours, didn't it? But No, it was a good experience. You got to meet a lot of people. You got to talk to a lot of people. You got to interact with people. You got a little bit of a personality with older people, which was good.
All right. And then you said before that you went to Immaculate Conception.
Yep.
Are there any experiences that you remember from Immaculate Conception that just really stick out in your mind, like when you think back?
Well, there are really a couple things. The first one was when I was in third grade. I think I told you this, Finley. I was like 8 years old. I got a disease called rheumatic fever, and that's the aftermath of strep throat. If you don't take care of strep throat properly, it can develop into rheumatic fever. I'm not going to get into all the medical details, but what it does is it causes problems with your heart. It attacks the heart valve. At that time, the cure for that was bed rest. They didn't treat you with a lot of drugs. So the doctor that was taking care of me, he basically just said I had to be in bed for the next a certain amount of time, excuse me, until this went away. Well, that turned out to be like 9 months. So I spent my entire third grade year in a bed at home. We actually bought a bed, a hospital bed, and had it in our living room so I could watch TV and that sort of thing. At that time, the nun that was in charge of the class, she and my parents got together and said, hey, George is too good a student. We shouldn't have him lose a year's school. So they decided the nuns would come to our house every week to tutor me. So every Saturday, 2 nuns would appear at my door with a class planning list for the week. At that time, nuns didn't own cars, didn't drive cars. I don't even think they could ride in cars. So they walked over to our house. So this was a winter year in Milwaukee, and our school was about a mile away from our house. So every Saturday, 2 nuns would show up, traipsing a mile in the snow or what have you, and sit at our house for about 3 or 4 hours to tutor me in my week's activities. I was kind of a celebrity in the class because I was the invisible man, the guy that was there that wasn't there. And the nun used to have the classmates send me letters and get well cards and notes and gifts at Christmas time and all kinds of things like that. So that was an interesting year of my life, and it got me an appreciation for. At 8 years old, I didn't have this appreciation, but later I had the appreciation for what a nun would do for somebody and how caring they were for their students and for their classmates and that sort of thing. So that was an interesting thing. I got rheumatic fever again a year later, a relapse, and that was a much shorter stint, and that was treated with a lot heavier drugs and got me through that. The unusual thing is normally that leaves you with a real bad heart condition, impacts you the rest of your life. For me, it really didn't until quite a few years later, and we can talk about that later. When I got heart problems when I was about 50, but that was from the time I was 8 years old to the time I was 50. I lived a totally normal life, and there were no restrictions on me. So that was one thing. The other thing, there was a nun that taught me in 7th and 8th grade that probably formed my life quite a bit. Her name was Sister Josette. She showed up in Milwaukee. She previously, I think it was in Chicago. She came to Milwaukee and joined our school when I was in 7th grade. At that time, our classes were big. Each grade had like 120 kids in the grade. So there were 3 classes normally. At our school, you just stayed in one class and you went all the way through your grades from 1st through 8th grade. Well, what that did was, even though it was 120 kids in our grade, you only knew about 40 or 50 of them that were in your class. When this nun got there, she was a young nun and kind of radical and kind of, wanted to make things happen. She didn't understand how that could be, how we could be in class for 7 years and not know 2/3 your class. So she was very adamant about mixing things up a little bit. So she did that. She got we got the classes mixed up, so we met with other kids from other classes. She was very into current events. She wasn't a stay in the front of the room, teach a class full of kids that just sit at their desks all day. She wanted to do things. She was into things like small groups where she'd have group leaders, where she taught you leadership responsibilities. So she was very instrumental in kind of forming my early life and some of the talents that you use when you get older in life. So she was very instrumental in our life, I guess is the best thing I could say. Other than that, grade school was grade school. We, as I said, we had a lot of kids, so the classrooms were very structured. You didn't have a lot of moving. You didn't move from class to class. You basically got in, you sat at your desk, and the teacher taught you things, and that's the way grade school was. We had sports, of course, which I participated in basketball and baseball, and we had some good teams and had a lot of fun doing that. But that was kind of grade school.
Okay, and then I guess next we should talk about high school then.
Well, actually, I kind of want to ask a question about the nuns. We didn't really cover that in the interview, but clearly you have a strong connection with nuns. But did they ever affect you in any other like later parts of your life? Because clearly it was a big part in your early life.
Did they impact? Did I interact with them later in life? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, like did you interact? Like, did they affect you in any other like ways later on in your life? Because
well, the nun I talked about, the nun that we had in 7th and 8th grade, she probably was only in her 20s when she taught us. So she got to be very close with us. So she later left the sisterhood and got married and had a family. I kind of kept in touch with her for a while and knew her married name and where she had relocated to. And we kind of lost track of each other for a long time. And then when the internet kind of came in and it was a little easier to track people and stuff, a friend of mine and myself tried to track her down because she was a big impact in all of our lives. And I did finally locate her. She was in Texas. I actually arranged a business trip to Texas, which wasn't really necessary, but I went down. I arranged the trip so that I could get down there and visit with her. So I did visit with her and her family maybe about 10 years before I retired. And she has a Facebook page, so I'm still in touch with her. She's in her middle 80s now and still very instrumental in my life. So other than that, we did have nuns in high school, and we can get into that, but I don't think any of them in particular impact us. You know, your formative years are in grade school, and you really form your values in grade school. And other than your family, it's your teachers, and there were a couple that were a big deal for us.
All right, and then in high school, I know you mentioned you did sports, but like, were you a part of like any other extracurricular activities like clubs or anything like that?
I was a part of just about anything I could be a part of, except for the band. And I would have liked to have been a part of the band, except it didn't didn't mesh with sports. I was a part of the school newspaper. I wrote for a school newspaper for 3 years. I was a part of the yearbook staff. We did that. I was in student government, student council, National Honor Society. I was a part of that. What else? We didn't have a lot of clubs like you may have, like robotics and theater, and we did have a theater group. I was not a part of that. Again, some of those things conflicted with your sports requirements. So if I'm practicing baseball or basketball every night, it's pretty hard to practice for a play or some of that sort of thing. But the other things that I could participate in, like writing for things. I was a sports editor in the newspaper, and for For the yearbook, I just kind of hung around and liked to be with people. I took some pictures. I tried to find out when a camera was taking a picture so I get my head in a picture, those sort of things. The editor was a good friend of mine, and about 2 months into our senior year, he said, "No more pictures of George, no matter what you're photographing." So I kind of became known as the camera ham. But yeah, about anything that was out there that I could be participating in, I did participate in. I did like to be around people and be involved with people. After high school, I kind of assumed the role of the class organizer. And being with Mary, who went to school with me and graduated with me, we ran reunions. Probably we tried to have a reunion every 5 years after high school. A lot of them were informal. We had a formal reunion at 10, 25, 40, and 50. When I say formal, that means with a dinner and entertainment and that sort of thing. The other ones, every other 5 years, were just get-togethers. Like we had a picnic one year, and we got together in a bar another year. We met at Festa Italiana another year. So we just made sure we kept together. They were very good years. Class liked each other, got along well with each other, and I kind of grabbed the ball and ran with it as far as the reunion organizer, because I enjoyed the reunions and because I was kind of good at organizing those kinds of things. So I kind of, one guy said I was the president for life. So
Okay.
And quickly, can you just tell us what high school this was?
this was St. John's Cathedral. It was a downtown high school. It was a school that most of my friends did not go to. And I think I told you that story before. Yeah. I ended up at Cathedral because I just flat out forgot to tell my parents to sign up for the one that most of our friends are going to. And it turned out to be a good thing, because most Catholic schools were kind of tied into certain areas. There were two Catholic schools in the South Side area, Don Bosco and Notre Dame. Most kids that went there were from the South Side. Cathedral, being a downtown parish, drew from all over the city. There were kids from the South Side, North Side, West Side, all over. So you kind of developed a broader scope of friends. And you saw people from more different backgrounds than the people where I would have went to at Don Bosco. Plus, it was a co-ed school, and I got to meet my wife there. So, and that worked out pretty well.
Right. And then, would you say, like, as you were growing up, would you say religion played a big role in your life, or is that just?
Yeah, I guess you'd have to say yes, because I mean, I've always been a religious person. We've always been a go to church person. I went to, Catholic grade school, high school, and college. So yes, it played a big role. Was I a real religious person? Not really. I wasn't really active in religious things like, religious doings and that sort of thing. But I was a churchgoer and a regular churchgoer, and still am. So it probably played more of a role as far as forming your moral values, making you a good person, making you honest, making you good to people. That type of religion is what the impact it had on me, as opposed to the formal religion. I wasn't a formal religion guy as far as being in church all the time and participating in masses and readers and that kind of stuff. That part I didn't do. It's more how it impacted my life as far as the type of person I am.
All right. And then you grew up when Father Groppi was kind of like a really big deal in Milwaukee, so I wanted to talk about him a bit. You being, correct me if I'm wrong, he was your uncle, right?
He was my uncle. He was my father's brother.
All right. And then did that have like an effect on like how people reacted to you when they met you?
Oh, big time. uh, Before he was active, I mean, obviously I lived a normal life and a guy that, had a lot of friends and knew the families had a lot of friends. When he got very active in civil rights, there was a very polarizing activity. People who you thought were your friends weren't your friends anymore. They didn't like a lot of them didn't like the things he was doing. It was Milwaukee was a pretty segregated, and still is a pretty segregated city. We get phone calls in the middle of the night by people wanting to yell about the uncle and what the hell's the matter with him? Why is he doing this? And he was controversial. He took on a very controversial subject. He did what was right, but what was right was not very well thought of by a lot of people. It's not a whole lot different than some of the protesting and things that's going on right now. It's different issues. His issue was open housing. He was protesting that the minorities couldn't live wherever they wanted to, that there were certain areas of the city that you couldn't live on. And he was protesting that was not fair. He grew up in Bayview. He was a South Side Milwaukee white boy. When he became a priest, he was first assigned to a parish in the South Side. Later, he was assigned to a parish in the inner city. When he got to that parish, he saw what was going on in the inner city and didn't think it was fair. The family was not active in civil rights or anything like that, but the family always believed in fairness. And he took that to the next level because he was immersed in an unfair situation. So he became pretty vocal. He became pretty controversial, and people reacted to it. Yeah, family, people who were friends of the family became non-friends of the family. Not all of them, of course, but there were plenty of them. And I got to see quite a bit of the ugliness in people during those years, and that has a lasting impression on you because you just, it's not fair. People shouldn't act that way. And what he was doing was the right thing to do. It just was very controversial. So.
Okay.
And then I had a question based off of that. You talked about getting some phone calls and things like that in the middle of the night. How did you and your family overcome those things?
Well, depending on which part of the family they were, some of the families just unlisted their phone number so that they wouldn't get calls anymore. Our family, my dad never did that. He said he was his brother and he wasn't going to hide from his brother and he wasn't going to hide that he was his brother. So we kept our phone number. We did get phone calls. You just get irritated with it. Our family was not a very confrontative family. So we would take the calls and thank them for their call and hang up and feel a little different about that person after the call. But it didn't end up in arguments or fights like that. But there were some people that just stopped dealing with us completely because we were relatives of a civil rights activist.
Right. And then, so those phone calls, they seem, well, pretty negative, but were there any people who called saying thank you for what he's doing, or
Oh, of course. Yeah, of course. But as most people find out in life, a lot less people are going to come and tell you when they like something you're doing than when they're going to tell you that they don't like something you're doing. So the people that were supportive were more quietly supportive. The people that were antagonistic were pretty vocal, and the prime time was after the bars closed. The people that would sit around the bars till 2 a.m. got very, very agitated and very brave with a snootful. Let's put it that way. and they would call and say, what's going on in your family? What's the matter with this guy? And on and on and on. You try to be polite, but sometimes you just had to hang up.
And then, oh, did you have something, Jim?
Oh yeah, I had a question kind of like, so he kind of talked about the positives and I kind of want to circle back to the negatives. Did you get like any threats? And if so, like, were there any serious threats that were like acted upon?
No, I don't think there were any threats that were acted upon. I was a little younger, so my parents would mostly get the phone calls. I think there were real threats, but I don't think they were any threats that were ever acted upon. But I don't know if there were death threats or anything like that, but there were threats. Yeah, there's no doubt about it. There were threats.
And then,
we never got any fights about it or anything.
did the Groppi store did it kind of suffer like some like falls in business when this was happening?
A little bit, yeah. The store used to deliver groceries during that time, much as it's coming on again now because of COVID. Excuse me. Part of the service that the store played to the neighborhood people and stuff is they deliver groceries. There are a lot of older people in the neighborhood that they would call in and ask for groceries. The phone calls, it got to a point where you didn't know what kind of phone calls you wanted to take, because they got plenty of calls at the store about my uncle, and you'd answer a phone kind of. For a while, the kids like myself, when I was working there, we were told not to answer the phone. Let one of the uncles or my dad answer a phone, because if it was one of these crazy people calling to really complain about the store, my uncle, they would just as soon take the call rather than us have to take the call. Did they suffer business-wise? Yeah, I'm sure they did. I wasn't close enough to the dollars and cents of the business to realize it. The neighborhood people, it was primarily a neighborhood people store. So most of the neighborhood people still came. They didn't go. Sometimes they had more to say than they should have when they came, but they did. They probably suffered a little bit.
All right. And then when he would have been doing these types of things, you would have been like in your teens, maybe early 20s, right? So
his main civil rights marches were in 68 and 69. Or 67, 68, 67, that era, 67, 68, 69. I would have been around 20 at that time. I was in 68, I was 20. So 19, 20, 21, I was in college at that time.
okay, so then did that, like, if people found out that you were related to him, would that kind of like cause some problems at school, or?
It really didn't at school. I was at Marquette at the time. It was a Catholic university. College kids are generally liberal and supportive of those kind of activities. So I didn't really have problems at school. The more interesting was, we were playing softball at the time, and we played, the backer for our team was Groppi Store. So we walk around with these shirts on with Groppis on the back of the shirts. That got a lot of bad press by people. You drive down the street and people be hanging out the car door, yelling at you and calling you names and stuff like that. To the point that my dad eventually said, you should go get back by somebody else so you don't have to put up with this kind of stuff. And we did. We moved to had a bar back us after that, and it made things a little easier. But no, I say at school it was not a problem. More like walking down the street, if you had a Groppi thing on you, a shirt on your back, you got some comments.
Okay.
I kind of want to ask, like, did you ever participate in any of his like projects, anything like that? And if not, how come?
I did not. At that time, I was in school. Our family was not really an activist family. We supported it, but we didn't march with them and that sort of thing. Um, I was more interested in doing my schoolwork, getting an engineering degree, getting ready to start a family, that sort of thing. It was just a matter of that was not where we were at. It wasn't that we didn't support it. We just weren't activists. I guess that's the only thing, the way I can say it. The only time I really was at one of his activities was they dedicated the 16th Street viaduct. The Father Groppi is called the Father Groppi Bridge. I don't know if you know that or not, but that was the bridge that he would march across with his minorities to protest civil rights. That was kind of the line of demarcation, the north versus south. The minorities, the blacks, lived on the north side of the viaduct. The whites lived on the south side of the viaduct. So for a symbol of open housing, he would march across the viaduct. And eventually and then there was a lot of hassles and harassments and that sort of thing going on. Eventually they named that bridge in his honor, and I was there for those ceremonies. But other than that, no, we were not a part of those activities. Primarily busy with school and baseball and dating.
How big did those activities tend to get? Would they be like just kind of small or just really big gatherings of people protesting?
They were pretty good sized gatherings of people. Yeah, they were. I guess I couldn't put a number on it, but it was, I would say 100 or so. I mean, it wasn't like 10 or 20. It was a lot bigger than that. And it was all over news. There was arrests made on both sides. It was pretty controversial, pretty hectic times.
Would you, in comparison to the riots that have kind of been going on recently, were they bigger or like just about the same size or smaller than the ones today?
I don't think they ever got as violent as the riots are now. I don't think there was smashing of buildings and that sort of thing, but there were curfews put on during that time period. People were not allowed on the streets after dark and that sort of thing because of fear of that. I think the more, I don't think there were ever the burning of anything or I shouldn't say that because I'm not 100% sure of that, but I don't, it was more confrontative and pushing and shoving and some of that kind of stuff. I don't think there was any shooting or looting or any of that sort of thing going on, but I can't be 100% sure of that either.
And then around that same time, the Vietnam War was going on. So did you notice that had like a big effect on Milwaukee in any way, or was it not as big an effect as other places?
The biggest effect on Milwaukee in the Vietnam War, there weren't a lot of protesting going on. Biggest effect is how it impacted your thinking as far as being objectors to going into the service and that sort of thing. That was the time when people were getting drafted to go to the service. People were finding ways to get around getting drafted. There were different things like that going on. There was some protesting going on, but it wasn't heavy. The bigger protests were like in Madison and that sort of thing. Wisconsin was a much bigger protest school against the war than Marquette was. Marquette had some, but not huge, as I recall, and certainly not in the engineering department.
All right.
And then
you said what, Kim?
You can go.
I was like, okay, yeah. It was like you were elaborating on some of the effects it had in Milwaukee. What kind of effects did it have in your life?
I'm sorry, you're breaking up a little bit. I didn't quite hear the question.
I'm sorry. I said we were talking about some of the effects it had in Milwaukee. Like, did it have any like personal effects in your life?
Personal effects of my life?
Mm-hmm.
No, not really. Like I say, I was in college at the time. We were in engineering school. We were a pretty close community. We didn't really get too involved in a lot of the activism at that time. Uh, in my life, you had some name calling going on, and I saw some of that, but I didn't ever have anything go on that prevented me from doing anything or anything that really derogatory in my life. There was some uncomfortable times, but nothing major like that. Like I say, I was not involved in the protests and the riots and that sort of thing, so we kind of kept out of that.
And then after college, you went and obviously went to like work at a bigger job. Did Father Groppi's like influence or anything? Did that kind of influence your chances of getting a job? Do you think? Do you think people still kind of like were sour about that by that time?
No, I don't think so. Not at all. Once in a while, you get a question. I mean, I did do some traveling, and I did interact with other companies, and he was known outside the Milwaukee area, so they'd see the name, and once in a while, you get questioned on it. Usually, I found that if I admitted right away, yes, he's my uncle, and didn't try to downplay it or hide it, you kind of caught them speechless. The people that were asking the question didn't know what to say next. They kind of expected you to say something like lie or deny it or something. And if you just said, yeah, he's my uncle, he was that's me. They, okay, It was like, now what do I say? But no, it didn't hurt me in my job performance or my job promotability or anything else. Of course, I was not far from home, so everybody knew the name in the area. I worked at Cudahy, which is a couple of miles from where I grew up. So it wasn't like you were going into a whole new world out there. So no, it didn't really impact me in that.
And then do you have any like stories from like any time in your life that you think really shaped like who you are today?
Stories on shaping who I am today. Well, I guess the three people I mentioned we've been talking about, the two nuns and Father Groppi. I think their interaction with me kind of shaped my life. I don't have any specific stories about them that other than generalities. They kind of made me what I am by imparting the type of people they were on me and influencing me and making me react to them. But I don't really have a story that I could tell you that would say this happened and as a result of that. No, I think the biggest things were the illness that I had and the training that I got from the 7th and 8th grade nun, and then the understanding people by the reaction to my uncle. That really got you to get a good understanding of what people are like or could be like. Good and bad, by the way. There's both sides.
Okay. I had a question. So you talked about like your family was a part of the church when you were little. You said that had somewhat of an effect on you. Did you become any like closer to the church after high school or like after college?
My relationship to the church has always been kind of the same. I've always been an active church member, an active church goer. I was a president of our parish council when our kids were in school. That was primarily driven by the fact that they were trying to close the school, and I wanted to get involved to make sure they didn't close the school. So So I was active in parish activities, but I wasn't real active. I was a dedicated churchgoer, but I wasn't involved in a lot of the activities. Did I change through life? No, I don't think so. I think I'm still about the same activity level as I was when I was younger. I'm a weekly churchgoer. I have the kids all in Catholic schools. We support Catholic education and Catholic schooling. Support the church, and that I'm more of a support than an activist in it.
And then as you were growing up, you think Milwaukee was kind of like big into religion? Do you think they were influenced in like heavily or not so much by kind of religion? You think people just kind of wiped it off or like applied it to their lives?
I don't know. I hate to say I never really thought too much about it, but I probably didn't. It's I don't think Milwaukee was a hotbed of religion, but it's the South Side has primarily been a Catholic area. There's been Catholic schooling throughout Milwaukee throughout growing up. When I was, as I mentioned to you before about signing up for high school and stuff, Catholic high education was very popular. So people would line up overnight to get their kids into Catholic schools. So that was big. But was it a real religious hotbed? I don't think so. I don't think it was any different than most other cities.
And then when you were younger, still speaking on religion, was the rest of your family kind of like religious? Did they kind of like push you in any way to be like more religious than other people would have been? Or were they just kind of it was part of their lives, but they didn't really focus too much on it?
I think it was just part of their lives. Everyone in the family was Catholic. I mean, there was no dissenters there. It was kind of what was expected. Well, it's Italian too. The Italians are Catholics, and it was more. I don't know what was done as opposed to strong emphasis on becoming priests or becoming nuns or anything like that. Back in the day, I suppose there were families that you had to have a priest in each family and you had to have a nun in each family. We weren't like that, and besides, we had our priest already anyway. But no, it wasn't that there was any strong emphasis to be more active in church than being a regular churchgoer. There was strong emphasis to be a regular churchgoer, to be a Catholic, a good Catholic. But there wasn't strong emphasis in our family to be an altar boy, a chief, a reader, or any of that kind of stuff. That some of us were, but there wasn't strong emphasis to do that.
All right. Finley, do you have any more questions about religion or Catholicism?
No, if you want to talk about something else, that's fine.
Oh yeah, I kind of want to move more so into like college again, and kind of like some of the things you experienced and what you went to college for.
Okay, college. I went to Marquette, obviously. I went into engineering because I was good in math and science primarily. It was like, and that was the era of the race to the moon and space exploration and that sort of thing. So anybody that was good in math and science should be an engineer and should be involved in those kinds of activities. So that's where I went. I went to school as a civil engineer. That didn't interest me as I started taking civil engineering courses. Went into mechanical engineering. Then I went into co-oping, which is every other semester you spent at a job function. I co-opted at Laddish. The first year I worked as a mechanical engineer, mostly drafting and mechanical drawing. Back in those days, we did that with pencils and rulers We didn't do it with computers. That was not really my primary interest. And then I went back and I did a stint in the metallurgical department, and that's where my interests lie. So I became a materials engineer, metallurgy option. And then Lattice was where I worked. Lattice made parts for jet engines, made parts for the space exploration program, the big solid rocket motor cases, made big parts for Caterpillar and earth moving equipment. And that's where I ended up staying for the next 40 years. During that time, I did a decent amount of traveling, both domestically and internationally. We were technical reps. So when we went to visit customers, we generally traveled with a sales guy to do the dollars and cents talking and to carry the conversation. The technical guy, we were a high technical company to do the work on what we had to offer from a technology standpoint. So that's what I did. I enjoyed interacting with people. I enjoyed traveling. I enjoyed seeing the world. Born and raised in one corner of Milwaukee, it was nice to be able to see the whole world in your business travels, and enjoy that. So.
And then you said you travel a lot for your job. How much of like what your company made and whatnot, it's like stayed in Milwaukee versus like being shipped and sold around the world?
Very little stayed in Milwaukee. Almost everything we made was sent around the world. The jet engines, primarily our customers were Pratt Whitney, which is in East Hartford, Connecticut. GE, which was in primarily Boston or Cincinnati. And then we had a number of international customers, and our biggest customer was Rolls-Royce, which is in England. So most of our jet engine products went there. Our solid rocket motor cases for the space program mostly went out to California and Utah. They made the things there. For a while, we were involved in making nuclear reactor parts, and those were shipped all over the country. That was, at that time, nuclear power seemed to be what was going to drive our country. That kind of went by the wayside because of some of the other issues with nuclear power. But we were doing that for a while. The heavy earth-moving equipment, and like these huge tractors and steam shovels and that sort of thing that you see Caterpillar make, and those are used all over the world. So most of our parts were not Milwaukee, and did not end up in Milwaukee. And we didn't melt metal. We were a forging company, so we pounded metal into shapes. We bought the metal. The metal that we bought was melted elsewhere. And we had a lot of traveling to those companies too, and those were all over the world. So that was the primary travel, but very little of what we did actually end up in Milwaukee.
Just out of curiosity, you spoke about like supporting nuclear power. How did you like feel about that? Did they ever like, I guess, yeah, how did you feel about that?
At the time, it was the coming thing, and it was very heavily controlled, and it seemed to be the way things were going to go. It seemed to be a safe way of energy, of making energy, generating power, and that sort of thing. And so at that time, yeah, I was fine with it. As things transpired, and you had events occur around the world, and things started escaping and becoming bad for the environment and all that sort of thing, well, then your opinion changes. And I think with most scientific type endeavors, it evolves. You go down one path and you run into a wall that tells you you're going down a wrong path. And then if you're intelligent, or if you're open-minded, you change your mind and you say, wait a minute, I was going on the wrong path. The data is telling me that's not the right way to go. I think that's what happened with nuclear power. I think initially it was a very good way to generate power and an efficient way to generate power. And as they found some of the problems with it, people started to change their minds and move away from it. So I think I was part of that whole situation. Like it, yes. Don't like it because things happened.
But you can still continue to like stay and support your company, though, right?
I'm sorry, I'm missing some of what you're saying is not transmitting good, so I'm not hearing all.
I just said that you still chose to stay with your company, though, right?
With my company, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, the company moved away from nuclear power.
Okay.
So the company became, there was a strong part of the company when I first started working in about 1970, maybe. Shortly thereafter, that kind of worked its way out of our business. And then we were primarily jet engine people and solid rocket motor people for the space program. So our company evolved.
You said your company kind of like evolved and moved away from stuff as it kind of became less popular. Would you say that like Milwaukee, like the companies in Milwaukee would kind of tend to do that, like just kind of evolve with time and just make different things as they?
Yeah, I think that's pretty much the case. So the other thing that happened in Milwaukee back in the probably 70s, the unions were very strong in Milwaukee, and union wages got to be relatively high. And people around the world were making the same type of product at a much lower cost. So the Milwaukee lost a lot of business just competitively to other companies around the world because we were a little more expensive to make here. We were higher technology in Milwaukee. What ended up staying was the difficult things to make, the things the other people couldn't make, or the things that demanded certain types of technology. Our company at Laddish at one time was making a lot of small parts, just pounding out little parts that went into different Caterpillar equipment and that sort of thing. It was called low tech stuff because basically all you had to do was heat it, beat it, and ship it. We got better at the higher tech engineering stuff where you had to heat it to very specific parameters and test it to very specific requirements and make sure that it didn't fail, because if it failed, it had massive repercussions, like a jet engine part, for instance. I always told people when our parts fail, planes come out of the sky, so you can't afford to make a mistake. If you're making a part that goes on a tractor and it fails, well, the tractor stops running. Usually you don't hurt anybody. So we ended up working with very, very high technology parts and highly engineered parts. And I think a lot of Milwaukee ended up the same way. A lot of Milwaukee lost the low technology stuff because it was a pretty heavily union-driven city. Wages were pretty good in Milwaukee at that time, and a lot of the businesses went overseas and into other places.
Right. And then you said that Milwaukee lost a bit of revenue because it was just more expensive to make things here than it was other places. Did that take a toll on just the city as a whole? Did it kind of like face any like money kind of trouble losing?
I think it did. I think where it really impacted people were some of the lower technology people. There used to be a lot of factory jobs that didn't take a lot of highly educated, highly trained people to do it. More, for lack of a better word, grunt work kind of work. And that kept people working, kept people busy. It kept people with money. So people were in a better place. When that kind of work went away, a lot of those jobs dried up. And a lot of those people found themselves out of work. And if you didn't have the ability to get educated or highly skilled or trained well, you had trouble finding work. And I think that happened in Milwaukee. And I think we're still seeing some of that now with some of our lower income areas and our lower economic stages in the city.
And then
we could use some of that work back, I think.
And then you said earlier, just kind of unless Jalen, do you have any other questions or?
Yeah, I mean, I did have one, although we kind of moved away from a little bit. It was just kind of like out of curiosity, this one as well. But you say your job had you like travel to like a bunch of other like states and places and parts of the world and country. Like, can you just name like some of those places for me?
Places I've gone to?
Yeah, like the job had you travel to.
Well, the prime when I worked in the jet engine area, the primary places I went to were Connecticut, Boston, and Cincinnati. The GE and Pratt Whitney. Internationally, I primarily went to Rolls-Royce. That was in England, and Derby, England is the name of the city. We had business in Sweden. We had business in Norway, Oslo. We bought metal from companies. Titanium, we bought a lot of titanium from a company that was in Las Vegas, right outside Las Vegas. There was a company outside of Portland, Oregon, that made some titanium for us. There was a steel company in Birmingham, England that we used to visit. Hit and miss different places. There were conferences in different areas, but I've been to a number of places around Wisconsin, around the country, and around the world. Mostly Europe, Western Europe, though. I didn't really do any traveling in Eastern Europe or in Russia or the Orient or any of that sort of thing.
All right. And then I kind of have a question about that. See, I mean, I don't know how well you'll be able to answer this because obviously you only work for one company, but do you think like Milwaukee companies, like when you were working, just kind of, do you think they stayed more local with their kind of production sales, or do you think they went more like other places?
I think, I think it's pretty difficult for any company to stay local with anything. It's a pretty worldwide market in almost anything you make. And to be local, you almost have to provide a service that is used in the area. Products are usually purchased elsewhere and shipped elsewhere. So I don't think there's a lot made in any city that stays in the city. I think most of it is made and shipped.
So I mean, did you have any more questions about like his job and things about that, or no, Finley?
No, that's all I got right here.
Oh, so kind of moving away from your profession. Earlier we were talking about, I can't remember what it was called specifically, but it was your fever. You talked about, it had affected you like earlier in your life, and then you said it came back to haunt you a little bit later as well.
Yeah. Normally, when you get rheumatic fever, it attacks your heart and leaves you with a heart condition that impacts your whole life. In other words, you can't do things as strenuous. You can't play sports. You can't do a lot of things because your heart is a problem. After my 2 bouts with rheumatic fever, I was deemed to be acceptable heart-wise. My heart sounded fine. There was no after effects. All the tests said I was good. So after monitoring it for a while, I was given a clean bill of health to do whatever I wanted to. Many years later, I think when I was about 50 years old, maybe, I had some illness which is called endocarditis, which is an inflammation of the heart sac around the heart. That came from scar tissue that was left from my early years with rheumatic fever. So early when I had rheumatic fever, some scar tissue was left around the heart valves. It didn't surface again until I was around 50 years old. When I was around 50 years old, it surfaced. My heart valves started to fail a little bit. They weren't working properly, and I got this other disease. In fact, I had a little TIA, they call it, which is like a short stroke, like a momentary stroke that didn't have, again, any lasting impact. But the heart valves were damaged. So then they monitored that for a number of years, probably close to 10 years, before they finally got bad enough that they said, hey, you got to get this fixed or you're not going to be able to function very well. I was getting shorter of breath. It was funny because I was getting old and I didn't realize whether I was just shorter of breath and not able to do as much because I was getting older or because my heart was acting up. Turned out it was my heart acting up. So shortly after I retired at about the age of 60, I had to have 2 heart valves replaced. And they were replaced because of what happened to me back when I was a kid. But again, I lived a full life without any after effects until that point. Now I'm still doing okay now, but it's being monitored.
Okay, so you say you're doing better now. Did this, like, especially with like 2020 and COVID-19, all this stuff that's going on today, like, is that kind of like affecting the way you kind of, I guess, say, maneuver in like your today's life now?
Well, I'm in a very high risk category from COVID-19. Besides being old, which I don't like to admit how old I am, but besides being old, I'm in that category. But
I mean, you look good. You look good. You look good. You look good. Let's give you that. You look good.
I still have the heart condition, and if COVID-19 hits me, it could very well impact the ability of my heart to function properly. So I'm in a position that, yes, I got to be very careful, and I am being very careful with the COVID-19. Hopefully the vaccine comes out quickly and then I don't have to be too careful anymore. But right now, discretion is the better part of valor, let's put it that way. But do I act any different? No. I mean, other than just getting old and being creakier than I was 5 years ago, 10 years ago, I feel fine.
Did you have any more questions about this, or?
No, I'm just looking. All right.
How are we doing on time, Finley?
Huh?
How are we doing on time?
We're doing pretty. Then to kind of, I mean, unless Jalen has any more questions, just kind of to close out here. You said you had some photos at the beginning.
Well, let's see how these work. I put them on my iPad. Let's see if I can show you a couple of them. I was going to go through my kids' pictures, but my brother's got them. He's got like 12 boxes of pictures. It'd take me about a year to go through them. So I just grabbed a couple that you might be interested in. And I don't know if you could see this or not. Can you see this?
Yes.
I can see that pretty well, yeah.
That's my impersonation of Finley. If you want to see Finley's baby pictures, that's what Finley looked like. At least hair wise. But
hair was a little crazy, but that's
me.
It's adorable.
We talked a lot about Groppi Store. That's Groppi Store.
Where was Groppi Store located?
It's right in Bayview. It's I don't know how to describe it. I don't know how familiar you are with Milwaukee. It's near Jones Island, near where the ferry goes across Lake Michigan. It's right in that area.
Okay.
Do you by any chance know how old that picture is?
That picture could have been taken yesterday. It looks like it does right now. But that's probably about.
It looks like it's in good condition for being.
I'm like, yeah, I'm like, the store's still up.
Yeah, it's still going. It's owned. It's still called Groppi's Food Market. It looks exactly like that. Yeah, it doesn't look any different. There's a little different entryway, but other than that, that's what it looks like. This is your dad, Finley.
Whoa.
That's your dad learning how to make wine with my grandpa, which would be his great grandpa.
Mm.
They're making wine in the basement of one of our homes. This is what I pitched for the Milwaukee Brewers.
You pitched for the Milwaukee Brewers.
I got to throw out the first pitch at a ball game.
Oh, okay. I'm like, whoa, that's pretty cool. How was the pitch? Was it a good pitch?
Was it a good pitch? It was a little high, but it was. It was not thrown into the ground like some other people have. This is my This is my family.
Okay.
That's my mom and dad. That I think was taken at your mom and dad's wedding, Finley, but I'm not sure. Is that one of the family's weddings? And that was my mom and dad. I had 2 brothers and a sister. What else do we have here? Oh yeah, this is talked about people in Father Groppi. That's one of the marches. It's him right in the middle leading the crew that's probably coming across the viaduct.
Did he have a name for him in his group?
He was most associated with a youth group, and the youth group was called the Commandos.
Commandos.
Yeah, and that was probably the group that he was most associated with. What else do we have here? This is the Groppi family. My dad is let's see he's the first guy on the right or left, the taller guy. That's my father. My grandma and grandpa were the 2 in the middle, and the whole rest were the family. Like I said, back in the day, the store was kind of the whole base, and they owned a number of homes in the area. And that whole crew lived in homes that were owned by the Groppi family, probably a 1 mile radius of the store. So. Let's see. And this is our whole family. Finley's in there somewhere. That was at a Christmas party a few years ago.
That's cool. I'm trying to find Finley. I want to find him so bad.
I'm in the middle.
I think he's right on the bottom holding the Santa Claus.
Okay.
I think he's kind of hidden by the Santa Claus down there.
Okay, Finley.
And this was many, many years ago. This was taken in front of the store. It's kind of a family picture. There was a parade that used to go in front of the store. And that's my dad on the side with a long apron on, holding my brother. I'm in there someplace. You can't hardly see me. It's, let's see, my mother's next to my dad. I'm about 2 down from her with a coonskin cap on. I was really cool at that time. But we were there waiting for the parade to come. That's right in front of the store. And that was probably, well, if I had a coonskin cap on, that's about 70 years ago or 60 years ago. So And that's about all I got.
Alrighty. And then to just kind of cap things off, unless Finley has a question after me, like what were some of the biggest changes you've seen in Milwaukee since you were younger opposed to now in your elderly days?
Well, in Milwaukee, it's gone from a low tech town, a factory town, to more of a high tech computerized town. I mean, it's just technology. Technology has taken a city in such different directions. There used to be a lot of grunt work in Milwaukee in the factories. There's not much of that anymore. And we've kind of suffered because of that, because there's a lot less jobs. I think the unemployment, I don't know what the unemployment numbers are, but I think the unemployment number or the amount of good jobs are not what they were back when I was a kid. So you have a lot more people out of work, a lot more crime and that sort of thing. Violent crime is obviously way up from where it was when I was a kid. You know, when we had trouble with our kids, I mean, when kids would get in trouble, you'd have a fist fight. If somebody was really bad, they might have had a little pocket knife. Nobody had a gun. Nobody shot anybody. The murders were way down. So that's a huge difference. We talked a little bit about the kids and activities. I think a kid's life is totally different than it was when I was a kid. I was a kid, we were kind of left out to fend on our own, make fun with your friends, a lot more personal interaction with each other. Now the interaction is mostly technical online. I'm doing things like we're doing right now. I mean, this would obviously not have been done when I was a kid. Women, and I'm really going to sound old, but mothers stayed home and took care of the house and the family. Fathers went to work. That's the way it was when I was a kid. My mom was a stay-at-home mom and worked, just stayed in the house. My dad worked 7 days a week at the store. That's the way that was at that time. When I started working at Laddish, you probably had 5,000 people at Laddish. I think now there's like 700. The dollar shipments is probably higher now than it was back then, but it was just a different type of work, a lower technology work, more people sensitive. Again, the technology has taken away a lot of jobs from a lot of people. Other than that, I think the whole world was a kinder world back then, but now I'm really starting to sound old. but I think it was. I think people were more cognizant of people and took care of people a little more than they do now. Like I told you the story about the kid coming to the store with the wagon and a bag full of money. I mean, nobody would do that now. I mean, the kid wouldn't even get to the store, first of all, without having the money stolen probably. But back in those days, that was the way things were done, and nobody ever even thought that somebody would get cheated when that happened. So it was a different world. But you move with it and you react accordingly.
All right.
Anything else, Jalen?
No, I'm fine.
All right, then thank you for doing this interview with us, Grandpa.
Yeah.
How long did it go, Finley?
I don't know. I think it was about like hour 20. That's pretty good. Yeah.
You're doing okay.
Yeah.
Good enough for an A?
Pretty good.
So.
Pretty good.
I made you guys work a little harder than Colin had to work with my Uncle Tommy.